Welcome to the Reflection Podcast. This is a place where we slow down and look deeper, not through the eyes of the world, but through the way of Yahusha and the Torah of Yahuwah. Here, we reflect on truth, light, and the path that leads to life. Join me as we walk this journey together, seeking wisdom, renewing our hearts, and drawing closer to Yahuwah. Let's reflect together. And now, your host, JP from Living by the Way.
Well, let's go right into this word, and I try to find the best title that we can look at it from and what position for this word. Do we hate? Can we hate? Should we hate? It's just this one word that in our English language has taken on a different position, I guess, according to. And I would say that it differences than the scripture does. The scripture has a different position than what the world has showed us. And when we go into the world's definition, we nobody wants to hate, and I think it's important because there isn't a hate that people have that's usually built out of anger. People have a hate for a people or a group or even their neighbor because of something that they've, you know, grew up in or they were raised in or they just had a bad situation. And so I want to go and look at the picture of what it means to hate in the Hebrew. And in H8130, this is the word sane, but it does have a sheen in the beginning, so it could be pronounced correctly shane with the sh sound because it's sheen noon yod. I mean aleph. And so this word here, if we look at it from the pictograph sense, I love looking at the pictograph because of what it can bring out for the word itself. And 8130, according to the ancient Hebrew lexicon Bible, it just says hate. But when you go back up to the parent root, it says like a thorn. Hate causes one to turn away from another. And it says here that you have this letter, the samek, but it represents like a thorn. If you look at the picture, it's like a thorn. And then you have the noon, which is represented as a seed, like a seed traveling. And then you have your last letter, which is the aleph. And it's interesting when I was looking at it and I was trying to read it from that picture and a thorn that's in the seed or what we would look at as a generation. When you think about seed, it's like generation, or it could also be like your inner being, like you, because what's in you is what's going to cause the next generation to happen when we talk about a seed, right? And then it talks about the aleph or the ox or the power. And so it's an interesting picture that you then see that it's not, it really is internal when you have this, what we see as the word hate. It's an internal area of our being that's being looked at it from that position. Now that's the ancient Hebrew lexicon Bible, is that's their definition. The common definition that people may read is what we see in the Strong's Concordance, which is to hate, and then they have it saying personally. And so you have these two definitions that we can go off of. And I want to bring out the Greek definition as well, because at the same time, we have two different languages that we're reading the scriptures in, and we're looking at it from a Greek perspective and a Hebrew perspective. We've talked about it before, but it's interesting when we're reading the scripture and we're trying to apply the Hebrew. I believe the Hebrew, it seems like it overshadows the Greek, where we're looking at even the New Testament from a Greek perspective. But there's still language in the Greek that we have to take in consideration and what it's saying. And in the Greek, it says in G3404, it uses the word miseo. It says hatred, to detest. And they say especially to persecute, by extension to love less. And so now we have all these definitions that we're having to deal with when we're looking at the scripture to understand how do we go and how do we use it, because everything has to be used in context. We can't just use the same definition all throughout the text without context, because then we can put ourselves in a bad position, and then we'll have some type of doctrines we can create, and then we're running with something that doesn't even make sense. And so here we see in the Greek, again, they have this one is the one that people use a lot, is to love less, because in the Greek it would make sense. But it also does say to detest. And so I believe that's an interesting portion to understand, for us to understand that it could be detest or it could be love less. Or we can go back into the Hebrew and see it being what we were seeing as far as in the Hebrew perspective, like a thorn. It's like a thorn that goes into your foot and makes you turn away from going into that direction. And so that's the primary, I guess I would say, the primary definition that we can play off of and go into the scriptures using. And with all those being said, we're going to have to be able to then understand what the scriptures is saying. So I want to read this chapter in Genesis chapter 37, because this gives us a picture of what it was of hatred, right? And it says here in Genesis 37, verse 1, I'll start in verse 1. It says, "And Jacob dwelt in the land of his father's sojournings in the land of Canaan. This is the genealogy of Jacob. Joseph, or Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers, and the young man with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought an evil report of them to his father. And Yisrael loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a long robe. And when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and were not able to speak peaceably to him. And Joseph dreamed a dream and told it to his brothers. So they hated him even more. And he said to them, "Please listen to this dream, which I have dreamed. See, we were binding sheaves in the midst of the field, and see, my sheaf rose up and also stood up. And see, your sheaves stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf." And his brothers said to him, "Shall you indeed reign over us? Shall you indeed rule over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. And he dreamed still another dream and related it to his brothers and said, "See, I have dreamed another dream. And see, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars bow down to me." And he related it to his father and his brothers. And his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall we, your mother and I, and your brothers indeed come to bow down to the earth before you?" And his brothers envied him, but his father guarded the word. So, just looking at it from that, we see that there was this hate that grew um, from his brothers towards him because of a dream, because of the dream. And of course, as we read the dream, it is pretty intense to see that the brothers are going to bow down to him, who's young. He's not the oldest of them. And they didn't really, of course, it grew. It was this hate that grew for him. Again, looking at the definitions, from the Greek perspective, it says love less, but then you also see detest, then you see abhor, and then it goes on to the Greek and it's that thorn. It was like they turned from like he was a thorn in their side or in their foot. And so because of that, it says in verse 12, "And his brothers went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Yisrael said to Joseph, 'Are not your brothers feeding the flock in Shechem? Come, I send you to them.' And he said to him, 'Here I am.' And he said to him, 'Please go and see if it is well with your brothers and well with the sheep, and bring back word to me.' So he sent him out of the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem. And a certain man found him, and see, he was wandering in the field, and the man asked him, saying, 'What do you seek?' And he said, I am seeking my brothers. Please inform me where they are feeding their sheep.' And the man said, 'They have left here, for I have heard them say, Let us go down towards Dothan. So Yosef went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. And they saw him from a distance. And before he came near, they plotted against him to kill him. And they said to each other, "See, this master of dreams is coming. Now then, come and let us now kill him and throw him into some pit, and shall say, some wild beast has devoured him. Let us then see what comes of his dreams." But Reuben heard and rescued him from their hands and said, "Let us not strike his being." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood. Throw him into this pit, which is in the wilderness, and do not lay a hand on him, in order to rescue him out of their hands and bring him back to his father." So it came to be when Yosef had come to his brothers that they stripped Yosef of his robe, the long robe which was on him, and they took him and threw him into a pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. And they sat down to eat a meal, and they lifted their eyes and looked and saw a company of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels, bearing spices and balm and myrrh, going to take them down to Mitzrayim. And Yehuda said to his brothers, "What would we gain if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our flesh." And his brothers listened. And men, Midianite traders, passed by. So they pulled Yosef up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they took Yosef to Mitzrayim. And Reuben returned to the pit, and see, Yosef was not in the pit, and he tore his garments. And he returned to his brothers and said, "The boy is gone, and I, where am I to go?" So they took Yosef's robe, slew a male goat, and dipped the robe in the blood, and sent the long robe and brought it to their father and said, "We have found this. Please look, is it the robe of your son or not?" And he recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. An evil beast has devoured Yosef, is torn to pieces." And Jacob tore his garments and put sackcloth on his waist and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and all his daughters arose to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, "Now let me go down into Sheol to my son in mourning." So his father wept for him. And the Midianites had sold him in Mitzrayim to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. It's an interesting portion of scripture because we get to see that this hate that grew from the dreams then took these brothers into wanting to, first of all, they wanted to kill him. They wanted to just let him die. Of course, we see the other brothers step in and say, "Hey, let's just sell him." We see that the brother tore his clothes because of what he thought was going to be the plan, was to return him out of the pit. But the hate that we see in this picture gives us how far somebody could go when there is that thorn in their foot, or to turn away from somebody so much. And so this is one of those definitions of hate that goes into this extent that it can make somebody do something wicked. Again, they knew which way to go. They knew how they should walk in Torah, even though we haven't gotten to that place with Moses and the Mount. But we know that the scripture shows that there was an understanding of Torah. There was an understanding of the right rulings and instructions. And so this is just a picture for us to see what hate looks like, again, according to what Joseph went through. Here in this scripture here, I want to go to another section, and this is Exodus chapter 23. And I think that's, let me read this verse here. It says in verse 5, I was looking at this like hate turning to love, or being, we're called to have love. And in this portion of the right rulings, if you haven't read Exodus 22, 23, even 21, you would go and see the right rulings of Yahuwah. It says in verse 5, "When you see the donkey of him who hates you lined under its burden, you shall refrain from leaving it to him, and you shall certainly help him." It's amazing when you think about it that you're called, according to Yahuwah, you're called to go and help the donkey that is of your Maybe you'd even say your enemy, the one that hates you. See, the scripture doesn't say that you hate him, it says that he hates you, and you're supposed to go and help that donkey of the one that hates you and not leave him under its burden. It's an amazing picture because it's an opposite. I kept seeing it as how hate can turn to love. This hate that somebody has for you, again, the scripture does say, there's a verse that says, when we do this kind of love, it's like coals on somebody's head. And it's an interesting picture. But this hate that he says that this person hates you, and so because of that, doesn't stop you. You shouldn't just leave the donkey, because that would be the way of the world. The world would say that's somebody that hates you. It's your enemy. So just don't worry about that. Keep pushing. But that's not the situation here in Exodus chapter 23, verse 5. We see that it's different, that you're supposed to go and help that donkey that's of the one that hates you. In Deuteronomy chapter 22, it says this in verse 4. It says, when you see, now this is a different one, but now it says, when you see your brother's donkey or his ox fallen down on the way, you shall not hide yourself from them. Help him raise them without fail. Again, it's interesting because you get the comparison that this is your brother now, and you're given the same instruction. Yahuwah gives us the same instruction to go and help your brother's donkey that's under a burden, that's fallen down in the way. And the same way Yahuwah says, even the one that hates you, you're given the same instruction to go and help. And so there's this love aspect, because I believe when we understand Yahuwah's love, or when we see this hate situation, we also can recognize the love that's coming out of it. And so here we find that this is what it looks like when you see your brother's donkey, or when you see the one that hates you, their donkey. Either way, you're helping and you're taking that time out to be there for them. And that's important. That's important because, again, there's a way of the world, and then there's a way of Yahuwah. And so we're getting to see this firsthand of what it is to be in the ways of Yahuwah when we're in our daily life. Of course, we see what our Messiah said in Matthew chapter 5, verse 44. But I say to you, love your enemies, bless those cursing you, do good to those hating you, and pray for those insulting you and persecuting you. Again, Yahusha, we know it says that every word he spake, it was from the Father. So when sometimes I would look at this at times and I'll say, oh, he was elevating. And I think he did elevate, and he showed us who the Torah is and how to walk the Torah out. But the first word, I mean, the verse here, and it says in verse 43 of Matthew chapter 5, he says, you have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor. That's all you get in Leviticus 19:18. Leviticus 19:18, you see in the cross reference, it says, do not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the children of your people, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yahuwah. And I like the ISR, they give you this footnote that it says, hate your enemy. Was said, it says, not written, because it wasn't written in the Torah to hate your enemy. And as we just seen in the scripture, when your enemy's donkey was under its burden, you're to go and help it. So Yahusha was giving us exactly what the Torah was saying. It's amazing because he says, I say to you, love your enemies, bless those that curse you, do good to those that are hating on you, and pray for those insulting you and persecuting you. It's amazing. It's amazing. I was really blessed to see it, that Yahusha was giving us exactly what the right rulings were saying. And we get a good example here as well in Luke. Of course, this is a famous portion, Luke chapter 10, and we'll go to verse 29. And let's just start in 25 here. And he says, And see, a certain one learned in the Torah stood up, trying him and saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit everlasting life? And he said to him, What has been written in the Torah? How do you read it? And he answering said, You shall love your Elohim with all your heart and with all your being and with all your strength and with all your mind, and your number as yourself, your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, You have answered rightly. Do this and you shall live. But he, wishing to declare himself righteous, said to Yahusha, And who is my neighbor? And here we go. And replying, Yahusha said, A certain man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among robbers, who both stripping and beating him went away, leaving him half dead. And by a coincidence, a certain priest was going down that way, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. And likewise a Levite also, when he came to the place and seeing, passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan or Shamaroni journeying came upon him, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him. And he went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. And having placed him on his own beast, he brought him to an inn and looked after him. And going out the next day, he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said to him, Look after him, and whatever more you spend, I shall repay you when I return. Who then of these three do you think was neighbor to him who fell among the robbers? And he said, He who showed compassion on him. Then Yahusha said to him, Go and do likewise. It was another picture here that, as I was looking at this, that I can see what it could be to hate. Again, when we look at these definitions, it's not necessarily what we see in our modern time of what people call hate. It's it could just be a love less, like in the Greek, to love less. And you can even see it like regard with less affection. These men walked by this man, and that's a showing of hate. But again, if we look at it from the Greek perspective, it would be a showing of regarding with less affection, even though they knew better. Even though we're talking about a priest, we're talking about a Levite, we're talking about men of the word who know the Torah, kept walking by, and they didn't even stop to go and help this man and do what the Torah says. Again, we read that with the donkey. We read this. It's an instantaneous moving. It's you driving by and seeing somebody pushing their car on the side of the road, and they're in the middle of the street and just jumping out your car and going and helping. It's a sign of love. But could we also look at it like when you drive by and you don't even get out of the car as a way of loving less? Again, the word hate, it takes it to a different level because we've been taught what it means in our modern societies, that we say, oh, that's not, I don't really hate the person. I just got things to do. But in reality, that's the same perspective that these men do. They had things to do. They kept walking. And so it's an interesting perspective when we look at it and we start to consider that this is a possibility for us all. It's this is for us all to look at it in our daily life when we're doing our own whatever it is that you're doing in life, and you're put in a situation, you're placed in a certain place in life, and the reality is, what are you going to do, right? How are you going to move from that point? Now, there's another aspect. I want to go back to Deuteronomy here, and let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 32, because there's an aspect of how people feel towards Yahuwah. And again, I wanted to give the definitions in the beginning because there is something that Yahuwah says here. And he says in Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 41, and this is him speaking, and I highlighted in 37 that it says, He shall say, and this is Yahuwah speaking. So when we get to verse 41, he says, If I have sharpened my flashing sword, and my hand takes hold on judgment, I shall return vengeance to my enemies and repay those who hate me. Now, there is something going on here where these people hate Yahuwah. And he says this is what he's going to do to them. He's going to return vengeance to my enemies, he says. And it's an interesting area because now we see also this comparison of people who hate Yahuwah. And it's a very scary thing as I was thinking about it, because he also says here in Deuteronomy chapter 5, looking at verse 9, he says, again, this is an instruction. And if I even go back a little bit, just so we have the context, he says in verse 6, I am Yahuwah your Elohim who brought you up out of the land of Mitzrayim, out of the house of bondage. You have no other mighty ones, or this word in some translations will say gods, right, against my face. You do not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of which is in the heavens above, or which is in the earth beneath, or which is in the waters under the earth. And you do not bow to them nor serve them. This is an instruction given in Deuteronomy. Of course, we see as we go and look in the future, as we have the text, they did this. But it says, for I, Yahuwah your Elohim, am a jealous Elohim, visiting the crookedness of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing loving commitment to thousands to those who love me and guard my commands. You know, when we consider again what Yahuwah says here, he says, when you do this, when you bow down to these images that you built up to become your mighty ones, you're hating him. That's what Yahuwah was telling the Israelites, especially at this time. And it's true, because we know that they did this and Yahuwah was not pleased. And so it's an interesting area, again, for hating of Yahuwah. A scary, even a scary phrase to say, that people would do this. Here we have a verse in Romans. I feel like it really correlates with this section. Here in Romans chapter 1, looking at verse 28, it says this, and even as they did not think it worthwhile to possess the knowledge of Elohim, Elohim gave them over to a worthless mind to do what is improper, having been filled with all unrighteousness, whoring, wickedness, greed, evil, filled with envy, murder, fighting, deceit, evil habits, whisperers, slanders. And look in verse 30, haters of Elohim, insolent, proud, boasters, devisers of evil, disobedient to parents, without discernment, covenant breakers, unloving, unforgiving, ruthless, who, though they know the righteousness of Elohim, that those who practice such deserve death. Not only, it says here, not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice them. It's amazing because we see this in the New Testament. We're seeing that they're given over to this type of understanding or mind. He says, I gave them over to a worthless mind, and including in that worthless mind is somebody who would be a hater of Elohim. And as we just read in the scripture we just read, it says that they'll be they'll be done. They'll be done for. Again, this is this word, and it's this hate idea and understanding that we have to really recognize again, because it's a part of the scriptures. It says here in Psalm 68, verse 1, Elohim arises, his enemies are scattered, and those who hate him flee before him. So there's a war that it says here with Elohim and his enemies. And we still, again, we see there are people, and there's people today that hate Elohim. It's mind blowing, I would say, to somebody as ourselves who have been set apart and have a reverence for Yahuwah, to even think how this even makes sense. But you know it already. Everybody knows it, that today we have this going on in this world, that people speak bad. They speak bad against Yahuwah. Here's another verse giving us an understanding of Yahuwah and his that the people hate him. It says, "Your hand reaches all your enemies. Your hand reaches those who hate you." Again, there won't be left to be on their own to do whatever they want to these people. It's interesting that, again, I want to say it's interesting because I can only see from that perspective that some people would be willing to look away from Yahuwah. They would be willing to go and be against Yahuwah. So we're seeing this. And the last verse I want to bring under this heading of haters of Yahuwah, it would be here in John chapter 3. Let me go here to John chapter 3, and it says this in verse 20: "For everyone who is practicing evil matters hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his work should be exposed." And this verse it just came out to me because it just shows that there's people who practice evil matters, and those people, they hate the light. And again, the light, it has to come from a source, which I would say is Yahuwah. Yahuwah is the source. And even though we know that Yahusha is the light, we when you see it from this area, I look at it as that he's still the source. And so because of that, people who are practicing evil matters, they don't they hate the source, it says. And when I would look at it in this case, I wouldn't even see it that like they love less. I take it to the level that these people practicing evil matters detest, they abhor. I don't want to take it to a lighter matter than that. Now there's some areas where we also get into some circumstances and situations where people may hate you, right? They may hate you, and we also want to take those into our own hands. A lot of times we may feel that we have to say something or do something. And I'm not saying don't defend yourself. I think that's definitely important. But here in 2 Samuel chapter 22, it says in verse 18, "He delivered me from my strong enemy, from those hating me, for they were stronger than I." I just love that verse because it really magnifies for our life, even us, that it says that there are enemies that are stronger than us right now that hate us. Again, looking at it from different perspectives of love less. Maybe some people do detest. Maybe some people are angry because of how you're walking and so forth. But it says that he delivered me. Yahuwah delivered us from my strong enemy, from those hating me. Again, using the Hebrew mindset of people that they look at you as almost a thorn in their foot, and they have to turn away from you. And he's our deliverer. So praise Yahuwah that he delivers us from, we can say, haters, right? From people that hate us. And so in Psalms chapter 18, it says the same thing. It says something similar, at least in verse 17. "He delivered me from my strong enemy," again, "and from those hating me, for they were stronger than I." Now we get the psalm where David's giving this recollection of what we just read in 2 Samuel, just to give us another witness of his mindset and again who David was. Psalms chapter 44, it says in verse 5 right here, "Through you we push our enemies. Through your name we tread down those who rise up against us. For I do not trust in my bow, and my sword does not save me. For you have saved us from our enemies and have put to shame those who hated us." Again, magnifying the idea and the understanding that there are some, especially during this time, that were hating David. And in the same regard, if we take the scriptures for our own life and we're applying it to us, we could still feel like you're in that kind of war and you can't do anything. as David just said, that he said, I can't trust in my bow. I can't trust in my gun, my sword. I can't trust in a house, a wall, a car to save me. I'm going to trust in you. And it says that Yahuwah is going to put to shame those who hate us. Again, giving us the understanding of who Yahuwah is towards, I wanted to title it haters of us, right? Haters of us. And it's not haters of him at this point. It's showing that they hate us. And here in Isaiah chapter 66, I want to bring this one out too, here in verse 5. It says, Hear the word of Yahuwah, you who tremble at his word. Your brothers who hate you, who cast you out from my name's sake, said, Let Yahuwah be esteemed, so that we see your joy. But they are put to shame. It says here that your brothers who hate you, who cast you out for my name's sake, said, Let Yahuwah be esteemed, so that we see your joy. Again, I'm looking at it from the perspective that unfortunately, unfortunately, we're in the same scenarios. It's nothing new under the sun. There are people who dislike you, or from the Hebrew perspective, you're like a thorn in their side, who cast you out for his name's sake. They don't invite you to something, right? They don't tell you to come over for the party or whatever, because they look and they say, well, you're he believes in this, and they go to church, or they're a part of this group, and they're an assembly, or whatever it is that they want to see. But it says, let Yahuwah be esteemed. Let Yahuwah be esteemed. And they are put to shame. And it's intense. It's intense because we want to do stuff about these situations, of course. We want to try to defend ourselves and make it make sense. But the scripture says not to even almost argue with a scoffer. It's like you're wasting your time to go and argue with them, right? So you're better off just putting it all in Yahuwah's hands. Here it says something, and Yahuwah your Elohim, this is Deuteronomy 30, verse 7, and Yahuwah your Elohim shall put all these curses on your enemies and those who hate you, who persecute you. Now, our Father is a mighty Elohim, El Shaddai. So, what can we do that's better than what he can do? What can we do that's greater than what he can do? And we see again, going back to the love aspect, we see Yahusha saying, Love your enemies. In a case like this, we have to love those who hate us. And we have to do it according to the scriptures. We can get into our own emotions and our own feelings of how we should go about something, but Yahusha said to love your enemies. And that's harsh. I'm only speaking from a man because it's harsh. It's hard to love those that hate you. And we're given this commandment, and we're given a direction and instruction. Here in Psalms 9, verse 13, it says, Show favor to me, O Yahuwah. See my affliction by those who hate me, you who lift me up from the gates of death, so that I declare all your praise in the gates of the daughter of Zion. I rejoice in your deliverance. Yahuwah is definitely looking upon us. So if he's looking upon us, then we have a response to have to give. He's going to see the affliction, as David said here. He sees the affliction of those who hated him. If we take those same words, they hate us. But he's going to lift us up. Yahuwah is going to lift us up. He's going to deliver us. So again, we have this section looking at it from the perspective of haters. I'd say it that way because it's the only word that made sense, is delivered from haters. People that have hatred or dislike or love less, however they may even abhor you. Here it says in Psalms 55, verse 12, it is not an enemy who reproaches me that I could bear, nor one who hates me who is making himself great against me. Then I could hide from him. It is not an enemy who reproaches me that I could bear. It says, nor one who hates me who is making himself great against me. Then I could hide from him. But it was you, a man of my equal, my companion, my friend. I wanted to bring out David and Jonathan in this conversation as well, because again, I want to make a comparison between love and hate. I want to show how much we have to understand both, but I didn't get there yet. But I wanted to do it because it's so amazing. But in this case, we're just talking about haters, those that hate us, and how Yahuwah is recovering us and he's delivering us and he's covering us and he's being that one that's letting us know you love your enemy. Let the wrath be upon Yahuwah's hands. Again, look what it says in Psalms 106, verse 10. And he saved them from the hand of the hater and redeemed them from the hand of the enemy. Yahuwah. Yahuwah saves you, me, from the hand of the hater and redeems us from the hand of our enemies. And Yahusha goes again and says to us, so love your enemies. You see that man's donkey? Again, I look at it from the perspective of it could be his car. Then you go and love. And you go and show that man who's hates you what it is and put the coals on his head. And here we have the same perspective. These are haters. These are people that it says the hand of the hater. Redeem them from the hand of the enemy. Yahuwah's going to do that for us. He's going to be the one to redeem us. He's going to be the one to take us into a better situation. But we have to keep his right rulings. We have to keep his instructions and not fall victim to the way the world is going to tell us to move. Look what it says in Psalms chapter 34, verse 21. Evil does slay the wrong, and those who hate the righteous are guilty. Again, if you haven't seen what the word righteous means, just for us to have a clarity on it, Sadiq, a just one. It says lawful. According to the KJV, it would be righteous, a righteous man. But according to the ancient Hebrew lexicon Bible, you will see this word Zadik, which is H6663, and it says straight, to be straight. One who is upright or righteous is one who walks a straight path. The question would be then, are you walking the straight path? Are you walking the upright path? Are you staying in that place? Because if you are, then this fits. Those who hate the righteous are guilty. Those who hate you are guilty. They're the ones guilty, and there's only one main, I would say, judge. You can judge a matter on earth between two parties, of course, but we're talking about the one that says that can destroy the body, soul, the whole being. He will be the one to find them guilty because they hate the righteous, the upright one, the straight one. That really encourages us to be straight. See where your crookedness is. Like the sister said earlier, I mean, it's a blessing because it's really praying to see what that crookedness may be in you. And if there is, for it to be removed. So that way we could be called righteous. We could be called Zadik. Psalms 29:10 says, Yahuwah sat enthroned at the flood. Oh, this ain't the one I'm sorry. I went to Psalms. This is Proverbs 29:10. It says, bloodthirsty men hate the perfect and seek the life of the straight. This correlates with the verse we just read. because and it elevates it into another area when it talks about they hate the perfect. Again, we looked at the word perfect before, but just to look at it again, what is the word perfect in the KJV? It says upright, tam, right? And it says complete. It even can be looked at as mature, someone who or something that is whole, complete, or full, one who is mature and upright. The bloodthirsty, it says, hates the upright. And it says that they seek the life of the straight, the Zadik, if we were to say in that way, the righteous. But who is the one that's going to fight the battle? Who's going to deliver us is Yahuwah. So even in these times, in these cases, and it's a hard situation because we have to still love in comparison. We still have to have love. Doesn't mean that you can be foolish. It doesn't mean that we can be foolish about things and say, well, I still got to love this person even though that they're physically hurting me. That's not wisdom, right? The wisdom I'm speaking on is about knowing that Yahuwah sees us. He sees every action we make. Hears every word. He knows everything about us. He knows all the hairs on our head. So we got to walk in wisdom and understand that if there's anybody that's going to deliver us, it's not ourselves, it's Yahuwah. And so this section was really speaking highly to me when I thought about delivered from haters and how we're to respond, because this is a section of hate again. So looking at this next portion, I have a few verses, and this one I would title it Love and Hate, and that was what came to mind. But it says in Proverbs chapter 12, verse 1, it says, whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but he who hates reproof is stupid. Man, that's pretty harsh. But it says that there's a love portion and there's a hate portion. Somebody who loves discipline loves knowledge. The growth is there. And again, we know that the fear of Yahuwah is the beginning of knowledge. But the one that hates reproof, who hates the correction, it calls them stupid. It calls them dumb. And that's pretty powerful when we talk about this hate and love, I would say, dichotomy that we're seeing here. In Deuteronomy chapter 7, it says this in verse 9. And you shall know that Yahuwah your Elohim, he is Elohim, the trustworthy Elohim guarding covenant and loving commitment for 1,000 generations with those who love him and those who guard his commands. But, again, you have that word but right here, repaying those who hate him to their face, to destroy them. He does not delay to do so. With him who hates him, he repays him to his face. Again, I'm it's hard for me to understand or see because what that is as we look at this word hate is on the other side of knowing Yahuwah. And it says that those that are on that side, he's going to repay them. He's going to repay those that look at Yahuwah as a thorn in their foot, as a thorn in their being. That's the way that people, when it says hate him. And so it's powerful to think about that. It's scary to think about it that way. And so let's go to another portion here. This is Proverbs chapter 50. Oh, I don't think I have it right. So I might have to skip on that one. So let's go to Proverbs chapter 1, verse 29. And it says, because they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of Yahuwah. These people, again, these are people in Proverbs, they hate knowledge. I don't understand that. You can't, it's hard to understand when somebody hates knowledge in the same way from a Hebraic perspective as if it's a thorn in their side. They totally turned from it. They turned from knowledge, and they also did not choose the fear of Yahuwah. And so we see a people that are going to be doing this, and there are people out there today. And when we talk about knowledge, just like I just mentioned, the fear of Yahuwah is the beginning of knowledge. We're not talking about understanding from a collegiate level book and you're reading some academic book in college or in school and you're learning what it says. But we're talking about the depth of knowledge that it comes from Yahuwah, and they hate that knowledge. They don't want to know it, and they choose the fear. They choose not to fear Yahuwah. Here in Proverbs chapter 5 and looking at verse 12, it says, and shall say, how I hated discipline, and my heart has despised reproof. Again, there are people who turn from discipline. They turn from discipline. And it says that their heart has despised reproof. Wow. Now, I want to bring us to another section. And it's a again, I do believe in love. And the only way for me to really magnify love more and more sometimes is to understand the hate side of it all. And to really, it starts to build where I'm understanding Yahuwah's love, and when I'm seeing all these scriptures, because I would I would change something like this in my own thinking of, for instance, the Proverbs 5 verse 12, and shall say, how I have loved discipline, and my heart has loved reproof. And when I think of the opposite of how we should be walking, we were in the book of Proverbs for months, and we're still there. We just took a sidetrack for the Monday study, but it's something that I would see through the Proverbs, that Yahuwah has given us the A and the B portion of life. He's telling you, here's the things that is hate, and here's the things that is love. And when we see him in both sides, and the way he's bringing out the wisdom, it really encourages you to love discipline, because there are people who hate it, who turn from it. Now, I want to go into this section that I would title, You Should Hate. And I was like, wow, this is what Yahuwah says. This isn't what we say, right? And what we're going to see here is what Yahuwah says. And we have to make sense of it all, right? We're just trying to make sense of it all. But it says, and I'm bringing this out because if we are following Yahuwah and doing as he does and walking as he walks, as Yahusha said, walk as I walk. Everything that came from the Father is from Yahusha came from the Father. Everything that Yahuwah is saying is a demonstration of how we're to walk. Psalms 139, verse 21 says, O Yahuwah, do I not hate them who hate you? And do I not loathe those who rise up against you? With complete hatred, I hate them. They have become my enemies. This verse took me into the thought of, are you for him? Or are you against him? You have to choose. We can't be riding the fence. We can't be lukewarm and saying, I love Yahuwah, but I also like to do this. In this case, we're talking about war. This is a verse of war. He says, I hate them that hate you. I'm on your side. You're the master. You're the one in control. You're the general of this army. You're greater. And so, again, using the perspective of what we find in the Torah, what we're finding in the definition, it's a thorn. It's like, I'm going to turn from these people that hate you. The ones that have turned from you, Yahuwah, I'm going to turn from them. But then verse 22 says, with a complete hatred, I hate them. There's this true turning from those that were hating Yahuwah that he got to. He got to that place. Now, it doesn't mean again, because we see again, I have to mention it again. Yahusha said to love your enemies. So if I were to look at my enemies, I still got to have that love for them when I see these situations, an opportunity even to pour coals on their head with love. Doesn't mean, but this here is a war. It's a war type of a verse and portion. And it just took me into the area of, do I hate what Yahuwah hates? Do I hate what Yahuwah hates? And it's a reality check for me that I was taking it as. Amos chapter 5, verse 15 says, hate evil and love good, and set up right ruling in the gate. It might be that Yahuwah Elohim of hosts shows favor to the remnant of Yosef. But now we get an instruction to hate evil. Again, these are things that we have to consider for ourselves as believers, followers of the way. And we have to say, do you really hate evil? Do you turn from it? Do you turn from evil when you see it? And not just in physical life, on your phone, on your laptop. I mean, how far do we go? Of course, we know in Amos, he's talking about real life. There was no computers, there was no laptops, and they weren't watching a movie. But we're getting into a place of technology now, and I'm thinking it from that perspective. Do you hate evil though? And again, just for the clarity, if anybody needs to see what evil means, and it just says ra'ah, bad, as a noun, evil, naturally or morally. H7451. According to the ancient Hebrew lexicon Bible, it would say bad, something dysfunctional, wrong, evil, or wicked. So there's your definition for evil, so you know what you need to hate. Because this is what it says. Yahuwah said, hate evil and love good. Hate evil and love good. We're given an instruction here of what we need to do. Hate evil and love good. Psalms chapter 5, verse 5. Look what it tells us that we have to do. The boasters do not stand before your eyes. You hate all workers of wickedness. Yahuwah said, you hate all workers of wickedness. So now there's a level of it giving us a description, right? All workers of iniquity, of wickedness. Here's the word for iniquity. It says, perhaps properly to pant, hence to exert oneself, usually in vain, to come to naught, strictly nothingness. Also, trouble, vanity, wickedness, specifically an idol, H205. So we're talking about people who are workers of nothing, of nothingness, of just doing things that don't make sense. Here in the ancient Hebrew lexicon Bible, they say vanity. They define it as vanity, empty. And that's what we would call wickedness because when I look at it from the perspective of what it's saying is that these are workers of nothingness that they're doing there's none producing from it. It's a fruit tree that's not going to produce any fruit. But Yahuwah says, you hate all workers of wickedness. Proverbs chapter 29 says in verse 24, let's go there and let's see what Yahuwah says here. It says, he who shares with a thief hates his own life. I wanted to correlate it with the last verse because the thief is wicked. He's doing nothing. There's nothing positive in production of that man or woman when they're a thief. It says, if you share with that person, with that wickedness, you hate your own life. That's what Yahuwah sees from us is if we're sharing in that same plate with this thief or this worker of wickedness, we hate our own life. Of course, I think that a lot of us have already come to a place where we don't. But you never know. Somebody may not even realize that they're sharing a plate with this person that's walking in wickedness. It's having that friendship again with the world, the one that's against Yahuwah. Psalms 45, verse 7, it says, "You have loved righteousness and hated wrongness. Therefore, Elohim, your Elohim, has anointed you with the oil of gladness more than your companions." Praise Yahuwah, because I look at it from that position, anointed ones. This is what we are called to be. Now, you're called to be an anointed one. He says, when you have loved righteousness and hated wrongness. And look what they say in the ISR as their footnote. I love this. It says in Hebrews chapter 1, verse 8, chapter 8, chapter 1, verse 8 to 9, it says, where the Greek text has lawlessness instead of wrongness. So it says, have you hated wrongness? Have you hated lawlessness? If you have, and you've loved righteousness, then Elohim has anointed you with the oil of gladness. I'm looking at it like that from the scriptures, that you have been anointed and you are an anointed one. You're taking back what the truth is behind some of these English words that people have taken on. But this is what you have been, and this is what you have become because you loved righteousness. You love that straightness, that uprightness, that completion, that life that people don't understand because they have to do away with things that are wrongness or lawlessness, and they have to deal with it and they have to get rid of it. And so Yahuwah is giving us this encouragement. He's telling us, you've hated wrongness. And here in the Hebrew, let's go to that word for wickedness, and it says rasha, a wrong, H7562. And if you look at the ancient Hebrew lexicon Bible, one who has departed from the correct path or way. One who has departed from the correct path or way. You hate this. You don't hate the person, right? We're not hating the people who are departing from the wrong path or way. We're not hating the individual, but we're hating the outcome of what that individual brings, the fruit they produce, because that's what it becomes. It's about the fruit that a person is producing. We can correlate this here with Proverbs chapter 14. It says in verse 17, he who is impatient acts foolishly, and a man who plans wickedness is hated. Because Yahuwah just told us this is what we hate. So a man who plans wickedness is hated. By who? The anointed ones. That's who they're hated by. So in these cases, we're seeing that Yahuwah is telling us these are things you need to hate. You have to hate. Exodus chapter 18, it says in verse 21, let's go there. And it says, but you yourselves seek out from all the people able men who fear Elohim, men of truth, hating unfair gain, and place these over them to be rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of fifties, and rulers of tens. At this moment in time, Yahuwah says, this is who you're going to seek out from the people to be the rulers of everybody who fear Elohim, men of truth, and who hate unfair gain. So, what do you hate here according to the scriptures? You would hate unfair gain. You already fear Elohim. You're men of truth and women of truth. But it's also saying to hate unfair gain. That's amazing. I would say that's amazing myself because When you think about what it is to hate unfair gain, let's go to the word. And here in the Hebrew, when we looked at the ISR, it says hate unfair gain. But here in the KJV, it says hating covetousness. You hate covetousness, plunder, it says, it, according to the Strong's H1215. By extension, it's a gain unjustly, though. It's not a gain in righteousness, it's a gain in unjust gain. Here in the ancient Hebrew lexicon Bible for 1215 of the Hebrew, it says profit, the taking of money or something of value through force in the sense of cutting. You hate this, or you're commanded, you should, right? Hate this. You should hate the act of somebody coveting. Again, in the ISR, they translated it to unfair gain because you're taking of somebody's whatever it is, money or whatever items unfairly by force. Again, this is something that you are commanded to hate. This isn't something that you give an option to. Well, you have an option to choose whether you would like to or not. But Yahuwah is saying that this is what we, as anointed ones, would hate. You would hate unfair gain. Here he also says here in Proverbs 28, verse 16, a leader who lacks understanding is a great oppressor, but the hater of greed prolongs his days. So the hater of greed. So here, technically, you become a hater, but you're a hater of greed. And I thought that was funny for me, but it was something that I thought, I said, whoa. It says you hate, again, same word we looked at earlier, covetousness. You hate this, and they translated in the ISR to greed. Again, it's taken unjustly. You're the one hating this kind of ways. Of course, we see this in the world today. This isn't something new. There's nothing new under the sun. And so, you, if you hate this, you prolong, he says, your days. Let's go to Proverbs chapter 13. It says in verse 5, a righteous one hates a lying word. Wow. A righteous one hates a lying word, a liar. But in this case, it's even something that's coming out that's not truthful. A righteous one hates a lying word. And here in comparison, let's go to Proverbs chapter 26 and look what it says in verse 28. A lying tongue hates its bruised ones, and a flattering mouth works ruins. Well, let's go to that and see what it says in another translation. A lying tongue hateth those that are afflicted by it. Wow, that's interesting. A lying tongue hates those it crushes. It's so powerful when you think about this because a liar hates the person he's lying to. And this is what it talks about. A liar hates the one he's lying to. And we're told that, again, we just looked at 13, Proverbs 13, in verse 5, it says, a righteous one hates a lying word. So the opposite takes effect, that the one that gives a lying word really hates the righteous one. It's amazing because this is what the scripture is saying. Proverbs chapter 8, in correlation with those verses, it says, the fear of Yahuwah is to hate evil. I have hated pride and arrogance and the evil way and the perverse mouth. The fear of Yahuwah is to hate evil, which we've seen already. And now we added, you hate pride and arrogance and the evil way and the perverse mouth. These are things that Yahuwah has commanded us and told us this is what you hate. Again, I want to go back to being anointed. You've been anointed with oil. And because of that, because you're walking uprightly, because you're walking straight, you're going to hate those things. Psalms 97, verse 10, it says, "You who love Yahuwah hate evil. He guards the lives of his lovingly committed ones. He delivers them out of the hand of the wrong." It's amazing. It's amazing because I keep thinking about how far do you take this? How far are we taking this today in 2025? Are you really hating evil? Am I hating evil? And I have to really consider, because now we have all these devices. We have so many comedy scripts out there that people do, and it's funny. But is it pressing on an evil matter and making a joke out of it? And instead of us hating the joke, we're laughing. That would be the that would be something that we have to think about personally. We have to think about it. Psalms 101, verse 3 says, "I set no matter of Belial before my eyes. I hate the work of those who fall away. It does not cleave to me." This was an interesting one because he says, "I hate the work of those who fall away." Again, it's not those who fall away, but it says the work. It's like the outcome. Again, the KJV will say, "I will set no wicked thing before my eyes. I hate the work of them that turn aside." So there is this that they hate. It says, the making, again, asa, the work of those that turned aside. This is what it says in the Psalms that you would hate. You would hate that. The work, the outcome of the things that those that fall away are producing. Psalms 119, it says in 104, I got a couple from Psalms 119, and it says in verse 104, let's get there, and it says, "From your orders I get understanding, therefore I have hated every false way." We're just getting another witness of what the scriptures have already said that we've read, that you've hated every false way. Again, to know what that is, it says every false way. And here's the word for false, shakir, an untruth. By implication, a sham. False or untrue words meant to deceive. But it says false, untrue. This is what you hate, every untrue way. And we're finding in the scripture that it's true. It's true when we do look at it from there. In Psalms 119, verse 128, "Therefore, all your orders I count as right. Again, I've hated every false way." Here's another witness. Verse 113, I mean, this is Psalms 119, verse 113. It says, "I have hated doubting thoughts." This was a powerful one. This is what the scripture says. "I've hated doubting thoughts, but I have loved your Torah." Here you got the word for doubting. And they use the word empty or vain. It depends on if the word would be there or not. But it says the word divided for the word thoughts. Skeptic, that's interesting. So I find it interesting though, because they use the word doubting in the ISR version. But he says, "But I have loved your Torah." That's the opposite. There's a foundational way of thinking, a foundational way of loving the thoughts that you have is according to the Torah, compared to ones that's skeptical, that's moving in different directions, according to Psalms 119, verse 113. We have one more out of Psalms 119 and verse 163. "Again, I've hated falsehood and loathed it. Your Torah I have loved. Same understanding, worded a little bit different, but this is a person that says, I have hated falsehood. Now, going to the New Testament for a couple verses, it would say Luke chapter 14 in verse 26. This is what it says: if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters and his own life too, he is unable to be my taught one. Again, looking at it from the Greek perspective, ISR gave you the footnote to love less. And this is where we have to read in context in scripture. What we just seen throughout the Torah, we've seen that you have to get to a place where hate, you hate falsehood. But then you get to the Greek and you have a different understanding because the Greek is a different language and we're trying to balance it out so we can make sure that we're not going to an extreme that may take you into a position of not loving, right? And so here's another verse here. This is an interesting one. Again, you have to make the distinction on what the scriptures are saying as you read them. But it says here, yet this, and this is Revelation chapter 2, verse 6, yet this you have, that you hate the work of the Nicolaitans or the Nicolaits, which I also hate. Again, this is a topic for another day, but I think it's a great topic if you go and look in who these people were and what were they doing and what were they producing. They must have been producing something that it says you should hate them. You should hate the works that they do. John chapter 12, verse 25. He who loves his life shall lose it, and he who hates his life in this world shall preserve it for everlasting life. So again, we're finding ourselves in this situation where do you love your life? Of course, because Yahuwah has blessed you with it. He's given you this life that you have. Nobody, I would think, is saying to hate your life to a point of causing yourself harm, but it's taking yourself to a place that you are lowering yourself and you're humbling yourself, that Yahuwah's your Elohim. And so these are some areas that Yahuwah says that we should hate, and the word hate, it takes us into these places. And again, if we know what he hates, then I would say that we can know what he loves. We can go into a place where we understand what he loves and we understand how to walk and how to love him. Again, Yahuwah has this in the scripture where he talks about this in here in Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 21 and 22. He says, do not plant for yourself any tree as an Asherah near the slaughter place of Yahuwah your Elohim, that you make it for yourself, and do not set up a pillar which Yahuwah your Elohim hates. So there are some sections in the scriptures that really magnify what Yahuwah hates and then what we should hate and how we should go about it. And again, in context, we have to take it all in as well, right? Now, the reason for all this, I want to close out by saying that I want to go through the next couple weeks into a section that I would say is important for everybody. It's important for me. And it's going through the places that Yahuwah hates. What are those things that it says Yahuwah hates? And I think we can go through them slowly to really gain the understanding of it all, because it says that Yahuwah hates seven things, right? Yahuwah hates seven things and they become an abomination to him. And so in the next weeks, I would find it very important for us to go into there so that way we can know what he hates. Because if he hates it, then we should hate it as well. And once we go through that and we see what he hates, then we're going to find how to really truly love him. We're going to know how to really truly walk in his way, because then it's not going to be just us as a matter of saying, this is how you follow Yahuwah, or this is how we should do it, because How do you supposed to love Yahuwah if you don't know what he hates, right? So I want to go into that section that we're going to say the seven things that Yahuwah hates. And it's interesting because it says that there's these things are abomination, right? It's an abomination to him. Well, let me just pull up the verse before we close out. But in Proverbs here, chapter 6, it says this right here. This is the ISR translation, and you can read it in any translation you have. But it says, these six matters Yahuwah hates, and seven are an abomination to him: a proud look, a lying tongue, and hands shedding innocent blood, a heart devising wicked schemes, feet quick to run to evil, a false witness breathing out lies, and one who causes strife among brothers. Now, I'm saying this because if we know this is what Yahuwah hates, and he says seven are an abomination to him, where are we in this matter? Are we in the same place as Yahuwah? We went through the verses right now, seeing how Yahuwah hates things and how we're called to hate stuff and all these different characteristics and things in life. So I would say let's go and look at these things week by week and see what are the things that he hates. They're an abomination to him, so that we can walk away and make sure that we're not doing these. Because if we are walking with one of these, then we're falling into a bad situation. So in the next coming weeks, we'll go through that. I just want to bring out the word hate so we can have a clear understanding, as we all need to have, of what it looks like and what it means. Of course, it's not exhaustive. You can go further into all those scriptures and look at cross references. You can look at commentaries, and you can do your footwork and come out with more understanding. And so praise Yahuwah that we have what the scripture says, that we have encouragement to how to walk, because we are believers. And again, he says, if you're an anointed one, if you're an anointed one, if you are of the way, right? We've had the group, it's called the way, but we also come into the understanding of being a branch, being attached to the vine. If you're attached to the vine, then you got to produce the fruit. You have to produce the fruit, because according to John, in the book of John, chapter 15, let's go there and read this as we close out. He says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. Every branch in me that bears no fruit, he takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes, so that it bears more fruit. You already are clean because of the word which I have spoken to you. Stay in me, and I stay in you. As the branch is unable to bear fruit of itself unless it stays in the vine, so neither you, unless you stay in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who stays in me and I in him, he bears much fruit, because without me, you are able to do naught. So it's very encouraging. It's very encouraging that we call ourselves set apart ones. We call ourselves the branches. We call ourselves of the way. We call ourselves believers, anointed ones. And because of that, we have a responsibility. We have a duty that people are going to look upon you, and they're going to see, do you hate this false way? Do you hate the evil that's around you when your friends, your family, your loved ones, your neighbors are taking part in it? How are you walking? So praise Yahuwah that we got to speak on this, and Yahuwah bless everybody. And I just hope that it does give you some food for thought and understanding as well. Like it's done me. I mean, I've been blessed by it, and just the expounding on it, I think that everybody can take. So we'll leave it at that, and praise Yahuwah again
Thank
for
you for
this.
being part of the Reflection Podcast. Every time you listen, share your thoughts, or join in the conversation, you help us build a community that reflects on the way of Yahusha and the Torah of Yahuwah. We'd love to hear from you, so leave a comment below and let us know what stood out to you or what reflections you'd like us to explore together in future episodes. And if this message has encouraged you, don't forget to like the video, share it with friends and family, and subscribe to the channel. By doing so, you not only support this work, but you help spread truth and light to others seeking the narrow path. Your voice matters here, and together we continue to walk closer to Yah. Until next time, Shalom.